The word symbolism comes from the Latin word symbolus, which means a sign of recognition. In most cultures, it represents an object, person, or place as an abstract idea beyond its literal meaning. The large and small font of our small and gutsy tagline, Big Little Social Impact Sector, represents the huge impact these economically smaller organizations have in our world. Our own version of symbolism, so to speak. Human beings interpret symbolism with aspects of spirituality that often make sense of things that happen by assigning particular meaning to those moments. There doesn't seem to be an agreed upon definition of spirituality, but there is some distinction between religion and spirituality, although often they are connected through personal interpretation, and in a biblical context, the term means being animated by God. I just love that, a divine moment to be shared, to be experienced solo or to have it hanging in the air, to be noted by whoever is around, and for others, the interpretation of God can have many spiritual forms and meanings. For some, there is a link between our spirit, our soul, and animals. Animals we care for up close or animals we admire from afar. There is a body of work in the self-improvement movement taken from Native American beliefs that everything is connected, and part of that interconnectedness is the belief in spirit animals. A spirit animal is characterized as a teacher or messenger that comes in the form of an animal and is connected through a personal relationship with an individual. Spirit animals are also called animal helpers, spirit allies, power animals, or animal guides. One such animal, the horse spirit animal, has deeply touched my guest today and guided her on a path upon which she continues to gain insights and learning while offering her knowledge and experience to others. This gives her an inner sense of peace, beauty, and a true clarity of purpose. Welcome to Small and Gutsy, our podcast featuring nonprofits and social impact organizations under $10 million. My name is Dr. Laura Witkoff, and I'm excited and proud to be your host. We hope you'll love the stories as much as we do, and perhaps you will find needed services, a job, volunteer, invest in, or donate. Please pass along any valuable information you hear today to others, and send me the name of any organization you'd like featured at lwitkoff@gmail.com. That's 2 T's and 2 F's. The horse spirit animal represents freedom, adventurousness, mobility, independence, friendship, and endurance. This majestic animal, known for its beauty and stature, has also endured pain, neglect, and abuse through domestication and mistreatment for use in gambling, entertainment, and sometimes just pure gluttony. Esta Bernstein is the founder of Saffyre Sanctuary, a horse rescue and rehabilitation program in the Los Angeles area that cares for horses that have been abandoned, abused, or neglected. They provide every opportunity for them to experience the possibility of enjoying a second career or offer them a well-deserved retirement. Esta is the author of Changing Horses, as well as an equine intuitive counselor. She grew up in the racing industry with over 45 years of equine experience. Esta learned how to rehabilitate horses from her own horse, Calendar. I may have mispronounced that, but Esta will correct it in a moment. And I'm so excited for her to share her passion and the story that brought her to the work she does today. I am so delighted to introduce my guest today, Esta Bernstein, founder and executive director of Saffyre Sanctuary. Let's get started. Welcome, Esta. Please share your deep passion and commitment to horses and the connection you feel and are able to really translate to both the animal and their human counterpart. That's what I find so fascinating about what you're doing outside of truly being a sanctuary for these amazing animals. So welcome.
Thank you so much, Laura. This is an honor to be able to share this with your audience and to hopefully give people a little bit more perspective on the connectivity between our evolvement as a species and how the horses are helping us.
I love that. I don't know if you want to start with a little bit of your background and story, because you came to this from a very different perspective from what I understand. And it grew through your passion, knowledge, and commitment to make a difference in these horses' lives. But I think it made a difference in your own life too.
As you said, I grew up in the racing industry and was doing a lot of the same things that traditional horsemanship and horse people were doing, which were not necessarily always conscious or kind. And it was through this observation of what the horses were really trying to teach us that I started developing and changing the ways that we were going to run the sanctuary and how we were going to treat the horses. But most importantly, get the message out to other people that
Mm.
there is a different way to do things. And this is a movement that's actually evolving at this moment, where many of the trainers that thought that so-called natural horsemanship was the way to go is now they're now finding that this was a fear-based type of mentality where you would make another creature do something for the whims of a human being, not respecting the horses as being the teachers that they are. When we got into the mindset of being more conscious about what their true needs are and giving them the freedom to express themselves, people started clamoring and saying, "Oh my God, this is telling me so much about my own issues, my own problems, based on how I'm treating these horses."
Wait, that's a brilliant moment. I need to have you repeat that because it's truly brilliant. Because there is, I just want to, it's a moment of reflection that you are allowing people to take in because how they're treating a horse is actually reflective of some of their inner issues that perhaps need to be worked through. Do I understand that?
Absolutely. That is 100% correct. So I recognize that in myself, that how I was treating my horses is truly how I was feeling about myself. And what happened through my journey, through a very painful journey, is that my own horse calendar was reflecting back um, the not so nice things I felt about myself.
Can you give an example? And I'm sorry I mispronounced his name before, so thank you for correcting that.
That's okay, no problem.
Can you give an example of that without, nothing that you don't want to reveal, but I think it's important for people to truly get this to make it as real for them as possible.
He would go to the ends of the earth to show me my behavior. And that would actually come out as physical limitations in his body, whether that would be an injury or an illness or something like that. So it was showing me where I was sick emotionally. And his final, moments, it was his eyes that went because I didn't want to see, and he could no longer look at me the way I was seeing myself.
Hugely powerful and hard to take in and accept. What got you to a place of accepting his lessons because he was teaching you?
Sadly, it was only after he passed from that experience that I actually woke up and went through this chrysalis, for lack of a better word,
Perfect word. Hmm.
and had to really do my inner work as far as what did I do? Where was I responsible for not fulfilling my purpose so that he could fulfill his purpose? But in retrospect, he actually did fulfill his purpose. That
Yeah,
was our
beautifully
journey.
said. Hmm.
And that was the gift he gave me, was this gift of self-love that I was not able to accept from another human being. So that's part of the beauty of all animals, is that they give us this unconditional love that we have trouble getting and receiving and giving to our fellow humans. One of the main things that we as rescuers and in the rescue industry, our goal is to not be in business.
Right. Perfectly said. Absolutely.
It's not just a matter of being kindness or more compassionate or more empathetic. It's like, how do we actually set this example where all people who have horses and other animals understand their purpose so that they're no longer doing these things to these animals in the first place? And that's the only way that we are actually going to find that we are no longer needed to do those sorts of tasks.
You're really talking about the relationship that has some reciprocity around respect. So, respecting that the animal has needs, and part of those needs are being loved and cared for. And in return, they love and care for you.
It's until we take ourselves out of the hierarchy and look at all living things as being equal, that have a right to be themselves without our interference.
It's just an amazing, beautiful circle in some ways that we don't often pay attention to, perhaps because we're in a space of seeing animals as objects rather than living, breathing connections to ourselves and to their own purpose of being. Even in terms of, it sounds like, even in terms of ownership. So, as someone owns an animal, how can they adopt this philosophy so they actually grow and learn and have this amazing relationship with the animal they've chosen to care for?
So, as one of the animal communicators I work with has always said, we're going to remove the word ownership,
Oh, good. Thank
and
you.
we're going to switch that to caretaker
Caretaker.
or
Love
companion
it.
or steward. So once we say a different word, that then shifts the perspective of the relationship. It can be something as simple as that. How do we do that? We actually ask them. We forget that just because they're not speaking English like we're having a conversation now doesn't mean that they don't speak. They certainly do. It's up to us to learn how to listen. And part of what we've forgotten to do is trusting our intuitive voice and the communication that they share with us, which comes to us telepathically. If you ask your animal something and you're getting a reply or a thought in your head, you might want to think about whether those are your thoughts or the animal's thoughts. And just kind of doing that little exercise can change how you think about what they understand. A quick example, my mother had this dog who was a finicky eater. And, even though I'm a vegan, vegetarian, I was there with the dog and she's like, I can't get the dog to eat. And I asked the dog, I said, well, what do you want? And I heard in my head, ham and cheese. And I was like, okay, Betty wants ham and cheese. And my mother looked at me and was like, okay. She put down a plate of ham and cheese and the dog went and ate. And she looked at me and so she was like, what did you hear? And I was like, I just listened to what she said. So it's not so much about us telling these animals what to do, it's about us being in the receptive mode of listening to their needs. And then what happens is that then they say, okay, what do you need? How can I help you?
And actually, this is true, by the way, for us as human beings with each other. I think about my early days as a new mom and not knowing what to do, right? And of course, the typical things of if the baby's crying, maybe they're wet, maybe they're this, maybe that. But the truth is, part of this is observing and being willing to take in what you're observing and hearing by being fully present.
And the beauty about horses is because they are so large and because they do have the ability to, do some damage if we are not fully
Yeah.
aware and present in their presence, that's when we find that accidents happen or somebody gets hurt or something like that. So it's actually mandatory that you are focused on that animal and yourself while you're cleaning, caring, and taking care of them, because if you're not paying attention, that's when problems can happen.
So, share. I love the philosophy. I love your movement. I love the intention. And share with me the program itself. You're a sanctuary, so it's really a safe space, is what that means to me. And I know there are various components. So walk me through some of those components, and then I'd love to hear a bit about what you've been able to observe over the years with the horses who have been there and shared their presence with you.
Saffyre Sanctuary, first and foremost, is a horse rescue and rehabilitation program. And we take in the horses that are worst case scenarios. So these are ones that have complex health issues, emotional issues, mental issues. And so when they come to us, we determine what they really need. We use a holistic approach, and people misinterpret the word holistic, and holistic means whole. What does that mean? That means diet. That means their homeopathic medicine. It means utilizing the veterinary tools if necessary. It's all encompassing to get them feeling as safe and comfortable as possible. It takes approximately 2 to 4 years to rehabilitate a horse completely, depending upon the level of trauma. So it's not an overnight thing, and we need to give them that time. A second aspect of our program is the rehoming program, where when we are full, which is all the time, and we can't take in any more horses, we will work with the owners to try to find an adoptive home if they are in a situation where they physically, financially, or mentally can no longer care for their horse. It's really hard on the horse when those things happen, and that's part of the awareness we want to share with people is they have to take into consideration the emotional effect that the horse is going to go through once that relationship is severed, because they do form close ties with their people. So rather than having them go to an auction and potentially slaughter, we are the middleman, and we want to work with the people and the horses to find the best case scenario so that the horse can find a new person if needed, and what really that horse wants, not necessarily what that person is looking to do with a particular horse. So our audience and our customers and our clientele are people that understand this, that they're not going to be getting a horse that they're going to use or ride. They're going to be getting a horse that's going to be their teacher.
So it's a completely different frame. It's a completely different mindset. And how does that selection process occur when there is someone who says, I really want to support Saffyre Sanctuary in this way? I want to rehome one of your horses.
They'll come in, work with us. I will actually have them fill out a form, and then I'll go personally visit them and the horse and get a feel of what's really going on. A lot of times it's hard to get a feel from both parties as far as what's going on, and I will get different information from the horse and from the person, and then see their body language, see where the emotions are, if this is really just a tool that they want to get rid of, or there's really a heartbreak involved where they're having some serious issues and can no longer care for their horse. And we encourage the owners, if they're still emotionally connected to the horse, to participate in the selection process of the new home, of the new person, and having that new owner and the old caretaker.
It's hard to get
Yeah.
used to new language, quite honestly, because we're so conditioned.
But we like to have them in communication. So if there's a problem, they can talk
Mm-hmm.
and say, okay, this is this habit I'm seeing. Did you notice this? So it's a win-win for everybody, where the
Mm-hmm.
owners will donate the horse to our organization. The adopter will adopt the horse through our organization. And for the safety of the horse, uh, pay an adoption fee, which in turn then supports the horses that we have that are not adoptable. So it's a win-win for everybody.
One of my dogs is a rescue, and it's a similar kind of thing, not in that same way, but where you want to pay for lack of a better word, the shelter in this context, right? Which I know you are not, but it does allow for the nonprofit shelter to be able to sustain itself. So that makes complete sense. What I love about your model as you're discussing it is it really creates a transition process that involves all parties, including the animal. And I remember when we adopted our second dog, we had our first dog, and we brought our dog to the shelter to see what dog our dog was interested in connecting with. Kind of the same, we had to kind of try it out as we hadn't had two dogs before. And it turns out, interestingly enough, that they're best friends. And it was just, I felt very lucky, but I think I didn't understand. I probably had a bit of intuitive understanding, but I didn't understand what you are talking about now in the fullest way in which you mean it. Because we think we're choosing our animals, and sometimes we are, but it's a much better fit when it's reciprocal. I think when I'm finished with this podcast, I'm going to start having conversations with both of my dogs in new ways. So you've already taught me something, because I think this works with all animals.
We're a sanctuary. We're not a shelter. This is not a numbers game for us. That really is a disservice to the animal and to the person, because it's not teaching them the new paradigm that's coming up. And so what we are also trying to do at Saffyre is work with other organizations to have them adopt this model of including the animal in the selection process and having the animal be able to choose their person as well.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so you need to walk me through that, because I'm so interested in how that works with horses. And I think it can be applied to every other animal when there is this relationship with an animal and a partnership, and where you want to have this understanding that we are on equal footing, and I've chosen to care for you and you've chosen to give back to me in the ways that you can as an animal. And I love that. So walk me through how you have set that up and how it works.
It takes a little bit of tuning into your own intuition first, and learning how to listen to the horses. So what happens is, let's say I'm going to a rehoming situation where an owner can no longer care for a horse. I will go and have a conversation with the horse and say, tell me about your relationship with your mom or your dad, and explain a little bit to them, this is the situation, and ask them what it is that they would like. Once I have that information, I'm then able to screen people that would say, okay, I'm interested in this horse. I'll know immediately if it's a right fit or not. If it is the right fit, I then will go with them to meet the horse, and normally the horse will come directly up, put their nose in the person's heart space, or if it's not a match, it could be great on paper, and it's not, the horse will look at me and turn around and walk away. So the body language is very simple. They come up, they make a connection, they're like, yes, this is my person. And if they walk away, they're like, no, keep looking, this isn't exactly right. And there's been, situations where we've had to make adjustments for what the person who has the horse needs and what the horse needs. But most of the time it works out really well. I think we've only had maybe 2 or 3 horses returned in the 13 years we've been doing business, because it's always been about the relationship.
And this sounds maybe silly, and I'm going to ask it anyway, but do you ever have a horse say, I don't want to leave where I am? This is hard for me. Like, I think there's got to be some anxiety.
It really depends, obviously, on the horse. And we have run into a situation where the horse is like, no, I don't want to leave my person. And this is where, divine intervention comes in, where something will happen where the person will then be able to keep the horse, or the horse will actually choose to leave rather than be shifted to another person or family. And that's their choice. That's the beauty of the choice, is they can make that decision to check out or not. When it's not...
And when you say check out, can you say more of what you mean?
They're going to leave their physical body.
That's okay. I just wanted to make that clear, that I think sometimes that can happen with human beings too. So I think we're all sensitive, and I want to be open to that possibility when it's too painful to choose something else.
It is. And horses being so sensitive, and forming these close attachments, especially if it's been a loving relationship, if they're not placed in the right supportive environment, they truly will colic and die. We had a huge rescue many years ago where it was not possible for this person to care for the multitude of horses that she had. And we placed all of them, but a lot of them didn't make it after a year. They weren't happy with the choice that they were presented because it wasn't, they didn't have enough time to process, and they were being separated from their herd. So if they can't be with their family in the body on this side, then they'll go to the other side and be with their family there.
Yeah, it's that's in some ways, at least it is a choice, even if it's a heartbreaking one at
It
moments.
is.
Too, you know.
And as I wrote in my book, there's something that people have trouble grasping is there can be no change without death. And I know that sounds dramatic, but death doesn't mean just death of a body. It's about an idea, it's about a habit, it's about a belief system. And so all these, and it really has to go completely away in order for true change to happen. Every being that's living is going to go through that at some point. It's how we look at it and what we feel about it that will determine whether we're going to be consumed by it or move on and see how we can emotionally feel better about it and more complete with the absence of what we've become comfortable with.
First, let me ask you, how many horses can you have at the sanctuary? And I assume you're full all the time.
So part of our challenge has been that we've not had our own property since our existence. So we have been stuck at boarding facilities. So where we're at now, we have 8. We also have a second location in Santa Barbara where they've got 5, and we've got multiple foster homes throughout Southern California. So at this point, we're at about 19 or 20 horses, which is completely at capacity. Some are available for adoption and some are permanent residents.
So great. And do you visit them periodically, or do they just check in with you, or you feel like they're doing great and they, don't really need any support necessarily?
We do check in periodically. We do visit. We do cover the expenses for the vet that comes out every month for their chiropractic and acupuncture. Mm-hmm. Those types of things, but the foster caregivers do the labor and the feed mm-hmm. and the farrier care and the love.
That's so great. It's really a great system. Although it sounds like perhaps a capital campaign is in your future to purchase a piece of property where you can house as many horses as there maybe are in need, or at least provide training opportunities at your location. Is that in the horizon?
Yes, that's actually in the very near future. In fact, this year, we're working on an enormous project that encompasses our philosophy and reaching that into other aspects of humanity, meaning sustainable food and things like that, and incorporating also farm animal rescue as well as the horses. So there's a huge project coming up that we are currently involved in, and we'll be needing it will be touching many more lives other than the horse community.
That's beautiful. That's actually great, because the more this philosophy, I'm using this with my dogs from this day forward. You've converted me just in this conversation. So do you teach this philosophy? Do you help people really build their capacity to have empathy and insight?
Yes, I do. So I developed, it's an equine coaching, and equine coaching has become kind of a blanket statement throughout the years. So what I found, though, is that it was more people-based and coming from the human's perspective and not the horse's perspective. So I developed my own program. It's called Equalia Actualization. And what that actually is equalia. It doesn't really mean equal. It means actually through the horse's eyes. And actualization comes from the Maslow's self-actualization.
For listeners who may not have recognized the name, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a theory in developmental psychology proposed by Abraham Maslow, comprising a 5-tier model of human needs. And the first basic of it's shaped in a triangle is the physiological. So really being housed and fed and clothed, and then safety, which could include your physical safety, but your psychological safety to an extent, love and belonging and esteem. And then the very top and the highest is self-actualization, where we all strive to be at that place.
My viewpoint came from, if we've got clean air and healthy food and clean water and a safe space, anybody can become self-actualized. And yes, I do teach that one-on-one, and I also teach other counselors and therapists who want to have horses incorporated into their program. And let's say they don't know how to interact with a horse, I will teach them and certify them to become an equine certified therapist, basically.
So do you have any sort of aha stories you want to share, or moments that were just, I don't know, surprising or enriching for you in some way that you want to share with me?
Yeah, the real aha moment was, and I wrote about it in my book, and it's actually talked about a lot, was a dream I had where a horse actually contacted me, and through an animal communicator, we had this discussion about what it was like to be in her body in a pampered environment where she was actually miserable because she didn't have a connection with a human. Her basic needs were being cared for on a physical level, but not an emotional one.
She was objectified.
Yes.
She was an object. Yeah, none of us want to be an object. Our animals don't want to be an object either. Beautiful. Keep going. This is amazing.
Right. So when she was having this discussion, which was a very long 2-hour discussion about her fears and what was happening to her body and how she was tuned into the horse consciousness and collective, which included the wild horses, and her fears of that what they're supposed to do with humanity was no longer going to be in existence. It truly changed my dynamic and my perspective of what needed to be taught, and gave me, I guess, the launching pad of how to get this out there. And it's through her voice that really Saffyre evolved.
How did you get to where you are today? Because you've been doing this for quite a while.
The conversation we had with the horse, Lava Lady, was actually 7 years ago. So it's been a process of really trying to figure out what worked. And as we become more awakened, we can introduce more things and more philosophies. It will become more mainstream, and the things that we've been doing will truly become archaic.
Do you have a rather large network of folks who are doing this kind of work, understand it?
We don't have a large network, but we do have a network, and they're all over the world. So kind of we all came into the same awareness at the same time, and now we're finding each other and merging our resources together. How do we collectively, as individual nonprofits, become a family and a unity where it's not, okay, we're competing over these dollars or these spaces, but we make this a collaboration for the greater good of all?
Yeah, I love that idea. I'm all about that. I often think about platforms and how can, in my world, it's more all of these social service, very small social service organizations, nonprofit and for-profit, who can connect and learn from one another. Yours is in a very specific space that I think would be such a great opportunity, because you are a movement. We talked about that in the very beginning of the podcast. You really are a movement of changing the nature of how people understand, I think, all animals, specific in this context to horses. I did get a chance to look at your website, which I love, and I did notice horses play with balls, and I want to know a little bit more about that. Or is that something that you've always just known, or you experimented, or the horses told you to try different things?
It was actually Pat Pirelli who started videotaping horses playing with things. And so that was part of the one of the pieces we took and moved forward with it, where we were like, okay, we're not going to make them push this ball because it's something we want them to do. Let's just put it out there and see what they do. My own personal horse, when I sent him to his trainer, the first thing he did was start throwing his bucket around. So it's something that horses naturally do. It's something I think that all animals do if given the opportunity and the freedom to express it. They love to play just as much as we do.
It's just amazing. And then they get to have playful moments. It's, intrinsic to their soul of wanting to play, and they have an object. And so they naturally know what to do about it, which is really incredible. So this hopefully is not a one-person nonprofit, but I know that you have volunteers, but I really don't know about your infrastructure. Share a little bit about the infrastructure, how you operate on a regular basis.
So we have our volunteer program, which people can find online. We have volunteer orientation that is held twice a month, the first and third Sunday of every month. And then we have a barn supervisor who then oversees the volunteers after they go through the initial training. And then it's just a matter of people showing up when they want to show up. We don't want to put restrictions on how many days or hours they can dedicate. Some people come once a month, some people come once a week, some people come every day. We don't have morning hours because, honestly, I'm not a morning person, but it was also a way for the kids to come after school and for people to come after work and kind of decompress from their day. Our hours are from 3 to 7 p.m., 7 days a week. We do have a very long waiting list to come to orientation, which is out at about 6 months right now.
Wow. So people really are stepping up and wanting to be connected to you in this way.
Yeah, it's a huge waiting list. But we keep the group small because of the amount of horses we have, and we don't want to overwhelm the horses or let the people feel like they're not getting personal attention.
Does that orientation take place at one of the facilities you have? Is that only in Los Angeles? I know you mentioned Santa Barbara too.
We have it going on in both places. So the one that is done twice a month is in Los Angeles. And usually it's just once a month in Santa Barbara. They're a little bit smaller in size, so they keep it down to once a month.
Is there one particular rescue event that you would like to share?
Probably the first rescue that we actually did back in 2012 was the most eye-opening as far as what goes on in backyards that people don't even know that's happening. And while I love to keep things, positive and upbeat, the things these animals have gone through was not always the case. And so two of the horses, or it was actually four at the time that we took in, they were at a backyard butcher, and they were watching other animals being slaughtered in front of them. And so knowing the how sensitive all animals are and seeing what they were seeing, you can only guess to what we walked into. People in the rescue, I don't want to use the word business, but the rescue world have to witness every day. And so there is a barrier that we have to put up emotionally in order to get the animals to safety and to work with them so that they're relinquished to us.
Because if there is some emotion that arises, it can actually make it worse for the animal as you're trying to rescue them. So it creates anxiety rather than reducing the anxiety and really just doing what you need to do in that moment in time to save them. And I have one other quick horse story. I don't know a lot about horses. I did a tiny bit of riding at summer camp when I was 10, but was a little bit intimidated. But I had a very good friend whose mother was taking care of a neighbor's horse while the neighbor was out of town or something, and she would do this like for months at a time. And I think I remember it was in Vermont. And I went up to visit, and all I heard was how horrible this horse was. The horse was angry all the time, furious, would try to bite the woman who was taking care of the horse. And I thought, I was sort of surprised by that. And again, I'm not a horse person, but this story really came to me as you were talking about it. And I remember thinking, could I take an apple to the horse and just see what would happen? It was free in a pen area. But I was scared because I thought, oh my God, the horse has gotten angry with the woman who's taking care of him. And my goal was just to get the horse to connect with me and take an apple from me. And by the end of my visit, the horse did. But I will never forget that. And I remember my friend was totally shocked because that horse was just known as being sort of vicious and mean. And I'm a scared person, so I was sort of shocked that it worked. But I refused to buy into that in some way. And I'm not sure why. I have no reason why I would have done that. And I just felt compelled to try to connect with this animal that everyone was saying was terrible, because I just kind of couldn't believe that the animal was terrible.
What people have suppressed or have not wanted to admit is that your animals will reflect who you are. And so if you approach an animal with love and kindness and compassion, that's how they're going to react. And if they're mean or angry, you really have to look at the person. Now, there are other factors. That's not 1,000% true. There are other factors that can cause behaviors. But the first thing you do is you look at yourself. And usually when you shift yourself, the behavior and the emotion of the animal will shift regardless of the trauma they've been through. So you can't approach fear or anger with fear or anger. We see what that does in our world. We have to approach fear and anger with love.
Yeah, what a great comment.
And you did a beautiful thing by showing that horse some love, because obviously that horse's emotional needs were not being met. And for any listeners out there, if they are having challenges with their animals that have been rescued and are still going through trauma, I highly recommend looking into an animal communicator to see what their backstory is and help them work through it. It's one of our go-to things when we get a new horse in, is we will have an animal communication session, so I have a bit more background about what I'm dealing with and how we can best help that animal. And anybody can contact me for references if they're looking for somebody to talk to about their pet or their horse.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. You're so seasoned in this. Do you yourself hire an animal communicator to come in when you visit a horse whom you might rescue?
We do have communicators come to our sanctuary. This is the funny thing about animal communication. When you're attached to your animal, there's a block. And it's really hard for owners to get an objective discussion going on, because there's the emotional thing that's happening. I can actually go and do that myself. If I'm going to rehome a horse, I will actually become the communicator. I can hear very clear, but I can't hear my own animals clear a lot of the time.
No, but it makes so much sense. So I'm just going to equate it to parenting your own your children, and then needing to go to a family therapist because the identified kid is acting out and you're thinking our family's fine. No, there's really stuff going on. So, I mean, it's the same kind of thing. It's so impossible. It's always easier to be an editor on the outside than when you're in the mud, right? Or the muck. It's much harder to see for all of us. This is true for organizations. They hire consultants to go in because the people within the organization have trouble seeing anything outside of their role. Even if they can observe pieces of it, it's really hard to see the whole. So yeah, I appreciate this. It's exactly the work that I do sort of in the organizational world, and certainly as a therapist. So you're speaking my language. This episode is sponsored by the Intrinsic Group, my boutique management consulting firm specializing in guiding organizations to leverage talent, optimize processes, and to ensure the organization's narrative is aligned with their culture. If you'd like to sponsor an episode, please reach out to us. To see all the small but mighty organizations we featured, check out our incredible infographics in the stories section of the Intrinsic Group website. So toward the end of my podcast, I always ask a round of quick and gutsy questions, and they're always fun and silly, and I hope you enjoy them. So I hope you're ready.
Yes.
What is at the top of your wish list for Saffyre Sanctuary? However, the answer can't be money or funding. What's at the top of your wish list?
A home for all.
Beautiful. If you were to think of a song that describes Saffyre Sanctuary, what would it be?
Love is the answer.
I love that you've used love so much in this episode because it's so true. And if we want to get away from fear, we have to really absorb, take on, and embrace truly what love is. So thank you for that. It's great. What makes Saffyre Sanctuary gutsy?
What makes Saffyre Sanctuary gutsy is we're willing to think outside of the box and be different than other animal rescue organizations, where we are truly putting the animals first and giving them what they need, not what we think that they need.
Truly, the word sanctuary fits, and it's such a perfect name for the organization. And it reminds me so much in other contexts when we've gone into, as an example, developing countries, to believe that we know. And so I so appreciate that you've put that in the context of in the animal world, and really particularly for horses. What is something that outsiders or even a few insiders don't know about Saffyre Sanctuary?
Some things that outsiders or insiders don't know about Saffyre Sanctuary is that this is just maybe a labor of love, that it's we do things day to day, and we just have a lot of trust in the universe that if we're doing the right thing, we will continue to exist.
That's great. That's a beautiful answer. If you could get one celebrity or influencer to talk about or endorse Saffyre Sanctuary, who might that be?
Well, I love Billie Eilish.
Great.
I think she's so progressive and has such a mature view on the world at large. And also Alicia Silverstone, who has been a huge animal rights activist. These are, I feel, very empowered women who are, have a voice and use it to the best ability that they can to better the world.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I think you ought to reach out to them, and we will too. You never know what can happen.
You never know.
Right? You never know. How can people reach you? What is the best way to find you?
The best way to find us is just to Google Saffyre Sanctuary, and Saffyre is spelled a little differently. It's spelled S-A-F-F as in Frank, Y-R-E, Sanctuary. You can also Google Horse Rescue Los Angeles. Will pop up as number one. And on our contact page is our email for the general organization, our volunteer email, and our phone numbers.
That's great. Was there a reason for that particular name? I'm just curious. I love it. I just wondered.
It was something that came to me in childhood, and then as I started studying gemstones and what sapphires really represented, I then realized why I was drawn to that name. And it's about the throat chakra, speaking the truth of the divine. And so that's what the horses do, and that's why it is Saffyre.
Esta, I want to thank you for this both enlightening, fascinating, and beautiful conversation today. You've really given me such a new view on things that I might have had a tiny bit of kind of natural inclination, but I'm going full force. You've really changed the way that I see things. And I cannot thank you enough for spending time with me to share this. And hopefully we'll spread the word so that others can learn about you, get involved, volunteer, just be part of your movement.
That would be amazing. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share what we do with your audience. We're all like-minded people here, and I know that we're all here to help each other. So hopefully some of the viewers or listeners will come and find us and volunteer and find out a little bit more about what we do and your organization as well.
Thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, please share it with your friends, give us some stars, and write a review on wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're interested in sponsoring a small and gutsy episode to keep it going, please reach out to me or buy us a coffee at www.buymeacoffee.com/small-and-gutsy. Just an FYI, for those of you who might want to be a small and gutsy patron, we just released our Patreon site with some really fun first edition small and gutsy merchandise. So check us out to support this effort at patreon.com/small-and-gutsy. Of course, we can't take responsibility outside of our own vetting of the organizations we interview, meaning we encourage you to do your own due diligence and research them as well. I want to thank my partners in this endeavor, the Intrinsic Group, the volunteers, my co-producer, sound engineer, and composer, the amazing Pavel Franson, my infographic creator extraordinaire, Sonia Fizek, Nate Addy for the exceptional logo, and all the friends and family who have guided and inspired me. A very special thank you to my biggest champion, without whom I could not have created this project, my very best friend and a true sounding board. Thanks, Mark Witkoff. Thanks for being there. From small and gutsy to big with impact, I'm Laura Witkoff, and thanks for listening.